What is going on, everyone, and welcome to my healer build. So a lot of you guys have been requesting it because I've been posting gameplay of a new character since I've been playing on this for quite a while. So the healer, it's one of those classes where the bad players blame you for their deaths, and you can't really heal stupidity when people stand in fire or like the enemy line of sight. Those are the things you can't avoid. But anyway, for all of you who are here because you want to make a healer or just want to learn about it, this is what it's going to be. So in the beginning, I'm going to be showing you all my skills, the equipment. I'm going to try to list some replacements just in case you can't get any or you're not like a higher level yet, and go over champion points. And at the end, I'll be showing you some gameplay and action of how the build actually works. So let's start off with the gear and equipment. So, well, actually, let's start off with this first. As a healer, I chose a high elf sorcerer, mostly because the high elf, you get extra magic recovery and extra magic in general, because that's good. So, next, we have our build. So, your main weapon, or the most important thing you're going to want is, I'll just take this off real quick, is my restoration staff. Now, what you're going to want on it is the powered trait, because you're healing and you want to increase that healing. So my enchantment, I chose to deal magic damage, which helps everything, and restore magicka, because you need more magicka. And we're using a 2-piece Torix pack set. Now, the 2-piece is simply for the 129 spell damage, and that's pretty much it. I'll try to list some other replacements in the meantime, but for now, you guys will see. Alright, so hold on, let me re-equip everything. And on my offhand, don't worry about this one. I'm in the progress of making a new set of weapons, and this will be, let's say, our DPS bar. 1 is DPS bar, 2 is heal bar. So, let's start off with the jewelry. Now, I understand jewelry is the most expensive set, or the most expensive pieces in the game. So, keep in mind, it doesn't really matter what you use as long as you're going to get like magic, health, or spell damage on it. But if you're trying to min-max everything, obviously you're going to be wanting the best, and I'll try to explain what I use and what not. So, the Ring of Willpower and the set. What it does is the 2 and 3 piece set adds spell damage and actual maximum magicka, so that's good. Generally, the arcane trait is the hardest to find. That's why it's the most expensive. Not really going to compare prices because it doesn't matter whether you're playing on PC or console. The prices in the market are probably going to be different. So if you're trying to min-max everything, you're going to want to go for magic for everything. But keep in mind your health may be a little bit low if you don't use any health items or anything. So I chose 2 magic and 1 health just to keep myself above 17,000. And for dungeons, generally 17,000 health is kind of breaking the minimum of what you should have. And yeah, so try to stay above that. If you go lower, you could get one shot by boss attacks or like bosses that attack really fast and hit you multiple times. So just to give yourself some extra space to like dodge for a quick second, that's where the extra health comes in. But on the top enchantments, you're going to want spell damage. That's a given. There's no replacements for it. You want spell damage. Alright, so now there are some better options, but this is what works for me. Depending on if you do a lot of trials or just do dungeons a lot, there could be better sets. I'll try to explain them and list some better ones. But this is the one I use. I use a 5-piece set of the Karganex Hope, and what it does is it pretty much gives you magicka, recovery, and max health. And the 5-piece is probably the most important. So the first thing you guys can see on this in the 5-piece is decreases the time it takes to resurrect an ally, and it gives you extra magic when you successfully revive them, which is kind of good. But if you're a good healer, most of the time people won't be dying unless they stand in fire and do dumb things. But the real thing you really want is the 214 spell damage. Now, keep in mind, all my stuff for the most part is purple, and that's the tier below legendary, because as you may imagine, upgrading things from purple or epic to legendary is probably one of the most expensive things you can do, and that's like endgame tier stuff. So, 5-piece set of this. We're using the hat, the robe or chest, gloves, shoes, and pants. And then we have the Torx pack, which is the staff and the belt to get the 129 extra spell damage, and the shoulder piece. Now this one is part of the White Gold Tower set. If you do dungeons, you could get the thingy by opening a chest, like bronze, silver, gold, undaunted thingy. So what you're gonna really want is the divines piece, because all of the stuff you're using, actually I'll just explain it now. Divines I use for my Mundustone the Apprentice, and what that does is increase spell power. So spell power and magic are like determined by how much you heal. So, or like how much you heal is determined by your spell power and magic. I said that backwards. So when all the Mundustone effects is increased by like 6.5% or 7.5 depending on the tier, and it just increases everything. So I understand not everyone might have this, so if you don't, you could get a 3rd piece of a Torx pack, and that will just give you an additional like 1,000 health, and that'll put you well above the cap for not dying. But if you do have it, you just want to use the 1 piece just for the extra spell damage. The weapon damage is cool too, but you don't really need it. It's just kind of there. And of course, for every single enchantment here, you're going to want divines. Now keep in mind, all of these things are craftable. The Torx pack set and the Kagrenek, I think that's how you pronounce it. Those are craftable. So you can just make that. The only thing that you might not have is the Molag Kana's Pauldron. The way you get this is by doing Undaunted. You get it from the chest, or like by wherever like faction you start them, and you can get them. The hardest part is probably finding it and getting lucky with it, but if you keep doing them, you'll eventually get it. So other sets that I may recommend if you don't have these are the Giuliano set. Now that is a 5-piece set. You can craft as well. Instead of the maximum magicka recovery and stuff, it gives you spell power critical and extra spell damage. So that's kind of good, but if you just want straight magicka increase, then this set works fine. And I do believe you can craft this in the Earth's Forge area. So if you've done the quest in the area, I think that's like mid-tier Fighters Guild somewhere, then you can just craft it. Otherwise, I do believe you can buy this from people or just have other people craft it for you, and that's pretty good. So we went over all the gear right now, and on my main bar we have a 2800 spell power crit. This is all unbuffed stats, and 41%. So there are other sets that you could use. Aside from the Giulianos, there's a healer set. You get that from the Dragonstar Arena, which is a trial, a 4-man one with late game stuff. So that's also purchasable from other people. So if you have enough money, you could buy that one as well. You're going to want the 5-piece for that because it gives you an 8% or 8 or 9% extra healing damage given to people. So that's generally good if you're a healer. And I do believe there's a spell power cure set. You get that from the White Gold Tower, which is a pretty difficult dungeon, I would say. So if you want to farm that, that's also a very viable set. And if you're doing trials, which is like 12-man raids essentially, you're going to want to possibly use the Worm Cult set. Now with the recent update, I do believe they made all the items, like you can get them up to champion point 160. So what that does is the 5-piece, it gives you extra, like it reduces the cost of magicka for up to 12 players. So if you're doing trials, obviously you're doing 12 mans and all that stuff. So reducing the magic cost for them is generally good. Everyone's buffed, everything's good. And yeah, that's a few other options you could do. So we've covered pretty much all the items and a few things I want to cover after. So this character is a sorcerer, and we're going to be going over the spells next, and I'll try to give some replacements just in case you don't have everything. But keep in mind, this is the essence of spell power. You can craft them at pretty much every level. Just look up the combination of alchemy. You're going to want to have it somewhere between your level. So what it does is it's essentially a potion. It increases your spell power or spell damage by 20%, and then gives you spell critical, which allows you to heal more and more. And then, of course, it does the magicka effect, which gives you instant magicka regen. So recovery for like 36 seconds, which is pretty good. All right, so keep in mind, this is a very important thing to get. Now, let's go over all my spells and skills. So remember how I said 2 is heal bar, 1 is sort of DPS and buff bar. So let's start off going from 5 to 1 and ultimate. Well, let's start with the ultimate first. The meteor. Now, this one is a pretty time-consuming one to get, simply because the meteor, you have to get your major skill to 10, and then you get that. That's very time-consuming. I do have another video of me just like farming lore books, so if you just want to look at the lore book locations, I have a video on that. You can find it somewhere, or just like Google a map and then print that out or something. I don't know, but it's pretty easy to find on the internet nowadays if you just need locations. So the reason why we use meteor is because there's one passive right here. Increases your max magicka and recovery by, well, it's 1% per level, so it's 2 out of 2. So 2% for each major skilled ability slotted. So we have 2 abilities slotted, which increases your max magicka. Inner Light is my 5. Now this one, they kind of changed it from a few like expansions ago. It used to be permanent, where the orb thingy would fly around you and you could see invisible enemies at all times. Now it's a limited one where you can only do it for 5 seconds before you have to recast it, if you just want that. But otherwise, the entire effect stays on until you recast. So the most important reason why you're using this is when slotted, or you see the second paragraph, well, slotted, your maximum magicka is increased by 5% and increases your spell critical rating by 2191. I do believe that's different based on your level or magic, like how much you have, so the higher the better. Now, if you aren't a sorcerer, entropy is a very good replacement for what I'm going to show you later, so keep this in mind. It could also potentially give you more, but I'll tell you the reason why I don't use this one. It's essentially what I'm going to be showing you on my backup bar, but this is a very good replacement. And my next one is 4, so let's go to the storm call. Wait, hold on. Bound Aegis. That is summoning, yeah. So this one is a self-cast. You cast it once, it stays on until you like die or recast it. It's like toggle on or off. And what it does is it gives you physical and spell resistance. And the most important reason why you're using this is it increases your max magic by 8%. So you're going to have to keep 4 and 5. Well, it doesn't really matter what order you put it on. I just like 4 and 5 because 1 to 3 is easier to reach. If you're playing this on keyboard and mouse, usually your fingers are on WASD to move, and then 1, 2, 3 is just right above it. So 4 and 5 is like slightly out of the way. So that's why I just keep it there. You only have to hit it once. So for these to stay on, you're going to have to keep them on both bars. Otherwise, if you switch bars and only have it on one, it disappears. So that's kind of inconvenient. So yeah, with that said, we got 4 and 5 done for both bars. And we'll go on to the restoration staff. So my 3 is my healing ward. this is the emergency spell in case someone is dying and you don't have time to heal them like really quickly. It gives them a huge shield, and it, like, if they're really low on health, it breaks the shield and just gives them a ton of health. Essentially, the higher your magic and spell damage, the higher the heal. So generally, more magic and more spell damage is good. Sometimes, depending on if I'm running with a good party or not, most of the time I run Healing Word because I don't trust people if I'm playing with randoms. But if I'm running with good people I know that don't like do stupid things, I would potentially switch it out for Combat Prayer. And what Combat Prayer does is gives them an instant heal, and aside from that, it gives them an 8% damage bonus for about, like, I don't know, 8 seconds, and then so it's like instant heal and then 8% bonus damage and stuff. So that's good. Depending on if you want to do double restoration or double, or like one restoration, one, I don't know, damage bar, you might want to put this on your second bar if you're using double restoration. If not, if you're doing like only one, then you could switch out Healing Ward or Combat Prayer depending on how you play. If you only run with friends and you know what they do, or if you just like use, I don't know, TeamSpeak or something, then you could tell them like, get out of the fire or don't stand in dumb things, and then that way Combat Prayer might be good. If you're playing with randoms and no one knows what they're doing, or if you're just playing with bad people, Healing Ward is generally the safer option. Now, Healing Springs. This is probably the spell that every healer in ESO uses. Well, I would hope so anyway. When you toss this down, essentially what you're doing is putting an aura around like where they're fighting, and over time for the next 3 seconds it like ticks off more health. So like in my case, if I toss this down, I would heal them for 2709 and then another 2709 for the next 3 seconds. So that's like your AoE heal, and then generally you cast this up and that's good. You're going to want to, this is pretty much your primary heal, and you're going to want to keep it up at all times. Mutagen. Now, this is a very different one, because I see a lot of people switching between both, like, morphs. The other one is Rapid Regen, and essentially what that one does is it heals for more, but, like, the one I use is Mutagen, and if your allies fall below 20% health, the Mutagen is, like, a shield that is consumed, but then it gives them a huge bonus of like 7,000 health and removes status effects like stuns and whatnot. So it's kind of more of a safer thing to use Mutagen, but if you're playing with good people, and let's say right now, as you guys can see, it heals for about like 20,000 over 20 seconds. The other one, the Rapid Regen Morph, let's say it would heal allies for, I don't know, this is just a random number, like 23,000 over 20 seconds. So the other one heals for more. This one gives them a small shield, but if they fall below 20% health, it just gives them a huge like boost in health instantly. So in my opinion, I think Mutagen is the safer ability, but either one is fine. It doesn't really matter which one you use. But if you're just like, if you're new to healing or something like myself, I only made this character like a week and a half ago, and then I got some tips from other friends who are actually good at healing. They told me to just use Mutagen. It's just like a safer strategy along with Healing Ward, but if you're playing with good players, then Combat Prayer is also a thing. So let's switch up to my other bar. Now this is an important one that you're going to have to consider. So we talked about 4 and 5 already. You have to keep them on both bars to keep them up at all times. So Power Surge. Now this is a sorcerer spell only. Essentially what it does is increases your weapon and spell damage by 20% for 33 seconds. It's one of those things where you have to cast every 30 seconds to keep up your healing and just increase everything. So that's one of the things. Now, I understand not everyone who wants to play a sorcerer. Templar is also a good choice. If you're a Templar, generally you're probably going to have Breath of Life and Repentance in replace of these. So, yeah, that's other options. And If not, you're going to want to replace the Power Surge with the Mage's Guild Entropy. Now, it does essentially the same thing. Increases your spell damage for 20 seconds, or by 20% for 20 seconds. But this one is 20% for 33 seconds. That's why I use it as a sorcerer. Essentially, they do it the same, but this one just lasts longer. And your 1 and 2, since I have my first bar as a DPS bar, not a full double healer build, these are my 2 DPS options. Now, I tried going full healer at one time, and then I've been in parties where the DPS actually sucks, so you feel like you have to do something. Also, if you're playing with some good people and you keep them at full health at all times, you don't need to overcast heals. So, like, let's say there are other people using self-heals for themselves, you're going to want to do some damage for yourself. So, my number 1 is on the Destruction Staff. I use Crushing Shock. The other morph, I don't quite remember what it is, but both options are very good. And that's my 1. And 2 is the Mage's Wrath. It essentially calls down lightning and deals shock damage. And this one does more elemental damage. So, with that said, you want to have Meteor on for both bars, just because you get the extra magic passives. So, with that said, there are other options. I've seen people use some support things. Not really necessary. Now, I try to build around it. Sometimes maybe Magicka Detonation is a pretty good replacement if you have it. Unfortunately, I don't PvP on this character. I literally just go do dungeons with people, friends and guildies and whatnot. So that's about it. But if you did have anything, Warhorn is a kinda okay ultimate, but to be honest, I'd rather just use Meteor for everything. Warhorn is a AoE thing that buffs your teammates and increase their resources, or you could just use Magic Detonation for your DPS. So, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. I'll just go back and show you. I have a 6-piece of light armor and then 1 heavy, just because I couldn't find a light piece with divines, and to be honest, it takes a while and you have to get really good luck. So me getting a light shoulder piece that has divines and the Kena set is not exactly the easiest thing to do. It's really all just luck. What I did for that, obviously you're going to want to max out all your light armor passives, simply because it gives you extra bonuses. And then since I have 1 piece of heavy, you're going to want all of these. It increases your health. And I would say if you have medium, it doesn't really matter. Still don't put any points in here. But if you get a heavy or a light set or a light piece for that, it's good. And there are a few things I'm still working on. Right now my Undaunted is at 4. The way you increase it is just by doing dungeons and stuff. So eventually, depending on like the types of like armor you have, heavy, medium, light, you get a 1% bonus for each. So since I have medium and light, or medium, light and heavy, I got 2. And then the way you get it is just by doing dungeons. So that's pretty much it for the bars and everything. Obviously, get all the passives and get more passives. And after that, that's pretty much it. So what have we covered next? You want all your points in Magicka unless you find yourself dying a lot. And just through time, even if you aren't that great, just put some points into health for then. But like once you start understanding dungeons a little bit better, know where to stand and position yourself, you die less, and then you put them all into magic, which would heal you a bit more. Honestly, this is the best thing to do. Just put it all into magic. But if you find yourself dying a lot, you could switch some gear up. And yeah, so let's talk about our champion points. Now, I have 395 champion points out of a total of currently 531. So, obviously, if you're watching a healer build from someone who has like 1,000 champion points, you still only have 531. Let's talk about the most important one first. Every single champion point I get that is blue will be in this tree. I put 100 into the effectiveness of healing simply because you're a healer, and that should just be a given. And then this one is healing by spell critical, so when you crit, you heal for more. And then the higher percentage, you heal even more. And then this one is pretty much just increasing your elemental damage. Really, if you're focused mostly on healing, this could be a bit lower. And you could honestly just put in both into these two. But if you want to do DPS as well, even if it's not that great, you just mix and match into 3. But I feel like this is the most important one to put it into. And 100 is the max. So get that one maxed out first. These two have 0 in it. I have 30 points into the steed. Mostly because I want the 30-point passive, which allows you to, like, when you roll dodge, your spell resistance and physical resistance is increased. And in some dungeons, you're actually going to be rolling and jumping a lot. So just having the extra by 30 is good. So it doesn't really matter how you put it in here. Just have 30 and that's it. But obviously, I put mine into spell shield, increases your spell resistance, and then reduces the amount of damage you take from critical hits. Now, I've been told that you don't really, or like NPCs or dungeon enemies don't critical, but if you're doing PvP, then the people obviously have crit gear, which you're going to want. So generally, if you're doing dungeons only, do 30, 0, 0, 0. But if I kind of figured I wanted a PvP at one point, so I just kind of split them. So that's why I have it there. So just get 30 once again for the phase, and then that's it. It really doesn't matter how you put it into the points. Well, obviously you just don't put it into these two, but how you build it like that is up to you. And this is your main bar, or your main like tree. Hardy and Elemental Defender. Now this one is going to be your resistances tree. So this one, you're going to want to build these somewhat evenly. Physical damage, poison, disease is reduced, and this one is just elements that are reduced. Now, I run a lot of dungeons, and for the most part, I know how to position myself better to the point where I don't really get hit as often by physical attacks. But you still want to even it out mostly, but I've noticed when I do die, it's because I die from either doing something dumb or standing in a spot where like magic hit me, like a magic beam hits me from somewhere. And yeah, so I want to increase my magic damage reduction. So that's just me. Honestly, I would even it out if you're just like an average player, or just in general even it out. But if there's something you know you need to work on a little bit more, then put a few more points into that one. So in my case, I die from magic attacks a little bit more than physical. That's why I'm putting it that way. Alright, so next, you're going to want to build the tower and the lover tree equally. Now this one is increases, or actually reduces, the magic cost of spells by 12.5%. Obviously, you're going to want to build them evenly. With this one, the Arcanist, and increases your magicka recovery, and just these two go together. Unfortunately, they're not in the same tree, otherwise it would have had the plus 120 thingy at this point. But it's not that it really matters what the 121 actually is, but generally magic recovery and the reduced magic cost of spells is generally good. So build those evenly, 100%. Just as a recap, the lady, depending, you would want to build these equally as well, unless you know there's somewhere where you're having more troubles on. And of course, in the apprentice, this is where all your blue points are going. 100% into healing first, max this one out immediately, and then depending on what you do, like if you want to do more DPS and less critical heals, then put more into that, or just even it out. It doesn't really matter, but this is the most important one. So with that said, I've been talking for 30 minutes straight. If there's any other things you want to know, feel free to ask, or just feel free to like leave it in the comments or anything. And with that said, there's one more thing I'm going to show you. Like right here, I would show you. I can't show you here, but in the clip I'm about to show you, as a healer, this is the #1 thing you look at, where your team's health bars are, because you're the healer. You don't want them to die. And then the next thing, that's the most important thing to look at, is obviously your health. And I'll show you my rotation in a little bit, but remember how I showed you this? 3, you start off with your buffs. 3 or 4, 5 is on at all times. So what you want to see is all of these going off at the same time and having these count down. Now, I understand this is an add-on, which if you're playing on PC, it's easier. If you're not, you kind of just have to count 30 seconds in your head, or if there's an option where you can actually see the timer going off after like 30 seconds, you recast it again, or just kind of look for small like details to see, like for example my 4, if this goes away, this stays on. If you notice this goes away, recast. And then for the other bar, once you see the lightning go away, then that's when it's gone, recast. But other than that, my spell damage shoots up. After all of that is said and done, you want to use your food, and pretty much with my 4 and 5, I'm almost hitting about 40,000 magic, and you want to stay above 17,000 health roughly. But with that said, if I had all legendary out gear, level 10 or 9 undaunted, I would say my maximum magic would be about 44,000. So that's not bad. It's pretty much enough to get you through an entire boss fight that goes on for like 5 minutes or so. Maybe using 1 or 2 pots, but for the most part you shouldn't run out unless your team is dumb and they do dumb things and can't kill it. But overall, that's the build. And with that said, I'm going to show you a quick clip of the final boss of a dungeon that I did, and I'll show you how the rotation works and how I do healing. So with that said, stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Alright, so here it is. So we gotta do quite a bit of damage before it breaks.
Let the fire and brimstone purify.
Alright, so I can heal this part pretty easily. Just waiting for my ulti to go up again. We should probably burn it before he breaks the second platform. That's ideal. I've actually done it before. Before he breaks the second platform, you can kill him. Now, I would rather have someone just drop ults than use Warhorn, to be completely honest. So there's one thing you want to avoid in this area. Is one, standing in fire, which is kind of unavoidable to an extent. And then when he drops down certain abilities, you have to block it. I think this is more like heal. Luckily, we got a guy running bigger as well, so that helps out a little bit. Killing the ads does help. The DPS is a bit low, but that's fine. If I knew that was going to be the issue, I would swapped out for combat prayer. So what else I look for when I'm healing is you see under my like resource bar is I see my buffs. I want to make sure my power surge is up, mutagen is up at all times. Make sure I don't have an ulti, and of course watch my mana. That's one of the most important things. Block. What he does when he jumps is he does a huge body slam that could potentially one-shot you if you're not careful, and it clears out all the fire that's on the ground. Alright boys, you got this. I don't really think I need to drop my ulti. Oh god, I'm stuck. Nice.
Is that you?